Imagine for a moment that you could walk up to a mirror right now. You look at your reflection. You see the lines on your face, the way your shoulders are holding tension, maybe a certain calmness or perhaps a frantic anxiety in your eyes. Now, imagine realizing that everything looking back at you wasn't just a result of genetics. It wasn't just luck. It wasn't just the random chaos of the universe. Imagine realizing that your character, your very personality, the texture of your soul, was not something you were born with, like your eye color or your height, but something you built brick by brick, or rather, thought by thought. It is an incredibly empowering idea, sure. But if we are being completely honest, it is also kind of terrifying.
It absolutely is
Yeah.
terrifying
Yeah.
because it removes the luxury of blame. We love to blame. We love to say, well, I'm just short-tempered because my father was short-tempered, or I'm anxious because the world is a mess.
Right.
But if character is constructed, then we are the architects. And if the building is leaning or the roof is leaking, we have to look at the foundation we laid. We can't fire the contractor because the contractor is us.
Exactly. And that brings us to the subject of today's exploration. We are opening the pages of a book that has been described as a manual for the mechanics of the human mind. It is James Allen's classic, As a Man Thinketh. Now, this is a book that has been passed around for over a century. It was published in 1903, and usually when you find a copy, it is worn out, highlighted, dog-eared, maybe stained with coffee. That is because it contains a premise that is so simple, it sounds almost like a nursery rhyme, yet so deep it aligns with modern neuroscience and ancient philosophy alike.
And that premise is what Allen calls the law of the mind. He posits that a person is literally the sum of their thoughts. And I want to stress that word, literally.
We are going to unpack that literally today because if it is true, it changes everything about how we navigate our days. We are focusing specifically on Chapter 1, titled Thought and Character. This is where the foundation is poured. But before we get into the heavy lifting, I have a small request for you listening right now. If this episode helps you, please hit like and subscribe for the next one.
Character is sum of thought.
So let's set the scene here. James Allen wrote this in the early 20th century. And it is easy to read this kind of Victorian literature and get distracted by the lace and the dowel and the half. But we need to strip away that vintage aesthetic and look at the mechanics underneath. This is not a book about magic. It is not about wishing for things and having them appear in a puff of smoke. It is a book about cause and effect. It is an engineering manual.
Right. I think we tend to think of our minds as this airy, abstract place where thoughts just float by like clouds in the sky. Oh, there goes a scary thought, or there goes a hungry thought. We feel like passive observers. But Allen argues that the mind is more like a factory, or, his favorite metaphor, a garden. It is a place of production.
Precisely. And the mission of this analysis is to understand the arithmetic of the soul. We want to move beyond the poetry and understand the equation. Allen is saying that the soul is not a mystery box, it follows rules. If we put X into the mind, we inevitably get Y in our character. It is that precise, it is undeniable.
Let's start with that core arithmetic. This entire philosophy hinges on one aphorism that Allen opens with. He quotes the ancient proverb, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he."
That is the cornerstone. If you pull that brick out, the whole wall collapses. And we need to pause on the word heart there. In modern English, when we say heart, what do we mean? We mean emotions, we mean romance, we mean Valentine's Day.
We mean sentimentality, follow your heart.
Exactly. But in wisdom literature, and in the context Allen is using, the heart is the control center. It isn't just feelings, it is the core of the subconscious. It represents the total sum of your intellect, your will, and your emotion. It is the engine room.
So he isn't saying you are what you wish you were. Because I think that is where a lot of people get tripped up. I look at myself and think, well, I intend to be a kind person, therefore I am a kind person.
Not at all. And that is a crucial distinction. We also judge ourselves by our intentions, but we judge others by their actions. Allen strips that away. He says, no. You are the sum of all your thoughts, not just the polished, polite thoughts you put on Instagram or use at a dinner party. You are also the sum of the secret thoughts, the resentments you nurse when you are driving alone, the jealousies you feel when a colleague gets a promotion, the fears you rehearse at 3 a.m. They all go into the sum.
That is the arithmetic.
Yeah.
You cannot just count the positive integers, the nice thoughts, and ignore the negatives. The equation takes it all.
It does. Allen uses this beautiful yet formidable analogy of the master weaver. He suggests that the mind is constantly weaving 2 garments. There is the inner garment of character and the outer garment of circumstance. We are never not weaving.
That's a haunting image.
It is. Every moment of boredom, every moment of anger, every moment of focus, the shuttle is moving across the loom. You are adding a thread. You can't say, oh, this thought doesn't count because I'm just venting. The loom doesn't care. It takes the thread you give it and weaves it into the cloth.
That brings us to the primary metaphor of the book, which I think is the most helpful way to visualize this. The plant, the seed, and the harvest.
Mind is a garden.
It is the perfect metaphor because everyone understands how a garden works. You cannot cheat a garden. You can't negotiate with soil. Allen writes that act is the blossom of thought, and joy and suffering are its fruits.
Let's break that down because I want to really understand the biology of this metaphor. Start with the seed.
The seed is the thought. Allen is adamant here. Nothing appears without a seed. In the physical world, trees don't just pop into existence out of thin air. They come from seeds. Allen says the same is true for human action. There's no such thing as a truly spontaneous action that comes from nowhere.
That is interesting because we often say things like, I don't know why I snapped at him, it just came out of nowhere, or I just did it on the spur of the moment. We love the idea of the spur of the moment.
And Allen would say, dig deeper. Get a shovel. That spontaneous snapping was likely the blossom of a seed you planted weeks ago. Maybe you were harboring a series of critical thoughts about that person. You didn't say them out loud, but you thought them. You watered them with your attention. You rehearsed the argument in the shower.
I think we have all done the shower argument.
Everyone has. And when you do that, you are watering the seed. So when the moment comes, when there is a bit of stress or pressure, the plant breaks the surface. The snap was just the blossom. The seed had been germinating in the dark for a long time.
Act is the blossom.
So the act is the blossom. It is the visible manifestation of the hidden seed. And then comes the fruit.
The fruit is the result, joy or suffering. Allen puts this very starkly. He says this removes chance from the equation of character. We often look at someone who is incredibly patient or kind or resilient, and we think, wow, they are so lucky to have that temperament. God really smiled on them.
Like they won the character lottery.
Exactly. But Allen says no. A noble character is not a favor from the gods. It is a natural harvest. It is the result of long-cherished association with noble thoughts. They planted patience, they watered patience, they weeded out impatience, and now they are harvesting patience.
And I assume the reverse is true.
Unfortunately, yes. An ignoble, weak, or bestial character, to use his vintage language, is the harvest of groveling thoughts. If you plant corn, you get corn. If you plant nettles, you get nettles. You cannot plant resentment and harvest peace. The botany of the mind simply does not work that way.
This is empowering, but also heavy. It means if I don't like the fruit I am eating, if I am constantly anxious or angry or feeling like a victim, I can trace it back to the seed. I don't have to just hope for a better harvest. I have to change the seed. But let me play devil's advocate here. Isn't this a bit harsh? What about trauma? What about people who have been through terrible things? Are we saying they thought their way into suffering?
That is the most common and important critique of this philosophy. And we have to be careful not to veer into victim blaming. Allen is talking about character, not necessarily the initial event. If something terrible happens to you, that is the circumstance. That might be out of your control. But the character you form in response to it, whether you become bitter and vengeful or resilient and wise, that is the harvest of your thoughts about the event. The event is the rain or the storm. The seed is how you process it.
So the storm happens to the garden regardless, but what grows back depends on what we plant after the storm.
Exactly. Two people can go through the exact same tragedy. One becomes a saint, the other becomes a monster. The difference isn't the event. It is the thought seeds they planted in the aftermath.
Okay, that makes sense. It brings the agency back to us without dismissing the reality of pain. Now, if we are planting these seeds, how exactly does the self get formed? We have this concept of dying the mind. This feels like we're moving from botany to chemistry.
Soul died by thoughts.
We are. This is where we see the strong connection between James Allen and the Stoic philosophers, specifically Marcus Aurelius. In his Meditations, Aurelius has this brilliant line, "The soul is dyed by the color of its thoughts."
I love that image. It's so visual.
It is. Imagine you have a white cloth. That is your mind in its neutral state. Now imagine you dip that cloth into a vat of purple dye. You take it out. It's purple. You do that every day for 10 years. That cloth is now deep, indelible, royal purple. You can't just shake it out and make it white again.
And in this analogy, the dye is our recurring thoughts.
Correct. If you dip your mind into cynicism every morning, if your first thoughts when the alarm goes off are, why is this happening to me? Or I hate this job, or people are idiots, you are dyeing your soul the color of cynicism. Eventually, that die sets. It becomes your character. You become a cynical person, not because you were born that way, but because you chemically altered your mind through repetition.
Aurelius also talks about ordinary cogitations. That's a great phrase. It sounds like something from a clockmaker's shop.
It is profound. We tend to think that our character is defined by the big moments, how we react in a crisis, or the big decisions we make, the movie moments. But the Stoics, and Alan, argue that it is the ordinary cogitations, the mundane Tuesday afternoon thoughts, that do the dying. It is what you think about when you are driving in traffic. It is what you think about while you're waiting for the kettle to boil. Those small repetitions are the drops of dye.
This connects so perfectly to modern behavioral science. When we looked at the research for this discussion, we found a direct line from James Allen to modern neuroplasticity and authors like James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits.
It is the same principle, just translated for the 21st century. Neuroscience tells us that neurons that fire together wire together. Every time you have a thought, you are carving a pathway in your brain, like a sled going down a snowy hill. The first time, it's hard. The second time, it's easier. By the 100th time, the sled just slips into the groove automatically. That groove is your character.
James Clear talks about the difference between outcome-based habits and identity-based habits. Let's unpack that, because I think this is where the rubber meets the road for a lot of us.
Focus on identity, not outcome.
Most people focus on the outcome. I want to lose weight. I want to write a book. I want to be rich. Allen and Clear would say this is surface level. This is looking at the fruit. The deeper level is identity. I am a healthy person. I am a writer. I am a prudent manager of resources.
So instead of saying, I want a harvest of corn, you say, I am a corn farmer.
Exactly. You focus on the identity. And how do you prove that identity? Through what psychologists call self-efficacy.
Can you define that for us? It sounds technical.
It basically means your belief in your own ability to execute. It's proving to yourself that you are who you say you are. You prove it through small wins. Every time you choose a salad over a donut, you are casting a vote for the identity of a healthy person. You are dyeing the mind. You aren't just eating a salad. You are reinforcing the belief, I am the kind of person who eats salads.
And there's another concept here that I found fascinating. Mental rehearsal.
What's your mental rehearsal?
This is huge. Character is largely formed through mental rehearsal. We are constantly rehearsing our future behaviors. If you're worrying about a meeting, playing out scenarios where you fail, or where your boss yells at you, or where you get angry and flick the table, you are literally rehearsing failure. You are practicing the script of anxiety.
It's like an athlete visualizing missing the shot over and over again.
Exactly. And so when the meeting comes, you perform the script you have been practicing. You get anxious. You stumble. Because you memorize that role. Alan would say, we are planting the seeds of our own destruction. We need to start rehearsing the character we want to display.
This explains why change is so hard. It feels like we are fighting against ourselves sometimes. Which brings us to the next point. Why inconsistency creates chaos? Why do we struggle so much to just change our minds?
Because the wild garden problem. A garden is a living thing. Alan points out that a garden will bring forth something. It is not an option. You can't have a garden that produces nothing.
Weed out negative thoughts.
Right. If I leave my backyard alone for 3 months, I don't come back to their earth. I come back to a jungle.
Exactly. Alan says, if no useful seeds are put into it, then an abundance of useless weed seeds will fall therein and will continue to produce their kind. Nature abhors a vacuum. If you are not actively cultivating optimism, focus, or kindness, the weeds of the world, fear, distraction, cynicism, will blow over the fence and take root. And weeds are aggressive. They multiply.
So neglect is an active choice.
Neglect is a form of planting. That is the scary part. Doing nothing is actually doing something. It is surrendering the soil to the weeds.
And then there's the problem of inconsistent seeds. I think this is where most of us live. We try to be positive for 20 minutes in the morning. Maybe we do a meditation app or read a Stoic quote. And then we spend 8 hours doom scrolling or complaining to our coworkers.
Right. We plant a nice, neat row of corn, and then we dump a giant bag of nettle seeds right on top of it. And then we stand back at harvest time and wonder why the field is a mess. But I planted the corn. Yes, but you also planted the nettles. You cannot have a double mind and expect a unified character. You cannot hold thoughts of failure 90% of the time and expect a character of confidence to blossom just because you did a 5-minute affirmation.
It is the ratio that matters.
It is the dominant thought pattern, the ordinary cogitations. The die is determined by what you soak in the longest.
Let's make this real. We have talked about the theory, the seeds, the dye, the garden, the weeds, but I want to know what this looks like on a Monday morning. Let's move to some practical examples. I want to look at work, relationships, and health.
Let's start with work. This is a common one.
Scenario. Someone feels like an imposter. They are in a meeting, maybe a high-stakes Zoom call, and they feel like a fraud. Their palms are sweating.
Okay, so let's look at the old thought, the seed they have been planting. It is likely something like, I'm going to get found out. I am not smart enough for this room. Everyone else knows what they're doing except me.
And they rehearse that thought every Sunday night before the work week. They lie in bed and play that movie.
Precisely. They dye their soul with insecurity. No, what is the blossom? What is the act that springs from that seed?
Silence.
Silence. Hesitation. It is not speaking up when they have a good idea because they assume it's stupid. It is defensive body language. It is mistakes caused by anxiety because their brain is so busy fighting the fear, it can't focus on the task.
And the fruit is suffering. Stagnation. They don't get promoted. They feel miserable.
Now let's apply Alan's logic. We change the seed. We shift the identity. The new thought isn't a lie. It's not, I am the smartest person here, or I am the CEO. That feels fake. The brain rejects it. The new thought is, I am a learner, I prepare thoroughly, I am here to contribute.
I am a learner. That shifts the pressure entirely.
It dyes the mind with curiosity instead of fear. If you are a learner, not knowing something isn't a failure, it's just part of the process. The result, you ask better questions, you listen better, you grow. The harvest changes because the seed changed.
Let's look at the next example, relationships and resentment. This is the classic difficult person scenario. The boss who micromanages or the partner who leaves dishes in the sink.
This is where we see the physical effects of thought. Alan specifically mentions how thoughts can wrinkle the face. He talks about sour thoughts making a sour face. And we all know people like this, people whose resting face looks like they just tasted a lemon.
So, the scenario. Dealing with a difficult partner or colleague.
The old thought seed is, they are doing this to annoy me, they are disrespectful, they are the villain in my story.
And the blossom.
Snapping back, passive-aggressive emails, slamming doors. And physically, that tightness in the jaw, the sour face, you are literally wearing your thoughts. You are etching them into your skin.
So how do we reset the character here? How do we stop the sourness?
We shift the identity from victim to master of self. The new thought is, I am calm. I set clear boundaries. Their behavior is about them. My reaction is about me.
I love that. My reaction is about me. That puts the power back in your hands.
It stops you from being a puppet pulled by their strings. If you get angry every time they push a button, they own you. You are the weaver. You decide the pattern of the cloth, not them.
Final example, habits and health. We touched on this, but let's get specific.
Scenario. The sweet tooth. The late night craving. The pantry raid.
The old thought. I have no willpower. I just love sugar. I can't help myself.
That is a seed of helplessness. You are rehearsing your own defeat. You are telling your brain, I am the type of person who gives in. And so, to be consistent with your identity, because humans are desperate to be consistent, you give in.
And the new thought.
I am the type of person who nourishes my body. It is not, I can't have that cookie. It is, I don't eat that because I am an athlete, or I am a healthy person.
It sounds subtle, but the shift from I can't to I don't is massive. I can't sounds like deprivation. I don't sounds like empowerment.
Exactly. I can't means I want to, but someone is stopping me. I don't means I have decided who I am, and that behavior doesn't fit the profile. It is identity versus willpower. Willpower is a muscle that gets tired. Identity is a state of being.
Okay, we have the theory, we have the examples. Now I want to get listeners involved. I don't want this to just be something you listen to. I want it to be something you do. Let's do a guided exercise. We are calling this the character reset.
This is a 4-step process. I encourage you, if you are listening, to actually pause and do this, or make a mental note to do it as soon as you can. Grab a pen if you have one.
Step first. Identify the weed.
Seed determines the harvest.
Catch a thought you have been rehearsing, one of those ordinary cogitations. Don't look for the big philosophical thoughts. Look for the nagging ones. Maybe it is, I am always late, or people are untrustworthy, or I am bad with money. Find the repeated thought that makes you feel small.
Step next. Name the blossom.
Be honest. What behavior does that thought produce? If you think I am always late, do you rush? Do you create chaos in your morning just to prove yourself right? Do you drive dangerously? Name the actual behavior. Connect the dot between the thought and the act.
Step third. Choose the replacement seed.
This is critical. It cannot be a lie. Don't say, I am a billionaire if you have $10. Your brain will reject it. Choose a better truth, a cleaner truth. Instead of, I am bad with money, try, I am learning to manage my resources. Instead of, people are untrustworthy, try, I am discerning, and I build trust slowly.
And finally, the action.
Prove the new identity. Choose one small action that matches the new thought today. If the thought is, I respect my time, then leave 5 minutes early, just once. Prove to the master weaver that you are starting a new pattern.
That small win is the self-efficacy we talked about. It stamps the new thought into reality.
Repetition shapes reality.
Exactly. It sets the die, one drop at a time.
Now, even with the best intentions, things go wrong. We are human. In our analysis of the text and the psychology around it, we identified 5 common mistakes people make when they try to apply this as a man thinketh philosophy.
The first mistake is the most common, focusing on the fruit, not the root.
This is when we try to force behavior change without changing the belief.
Mm.
Like trying to quit smoking while still believing smoking relaxes me.
Right. It is like taping apples onto a dead tree and pretending it is healthy. It looks good for a day, but the apples rot and fall off. It doesn't last. If you grit your teeth and try to be nice, but inside you are seething with resentful thoughts, the nice will fall off. You will explode. You have to go to the root. You have to deal with the resentment first.
Mistake next. Ignoring the weeds.
This is the inconsistency problem we talked about. You do your morning meditation, but then you let the rest of the day run wild. You allow the cynical drift. You have to, as the Stoics say, stand guard at the door of the mind. You can't let every thought in just because it knocked. You have to check ID at the door. Are you a helpful thought? No. Then you can't come in.
Mistake third. Expecting an instant harvest.
We live in a microwave society. We want the download to be instant, but character is a slow cooker. You think a good thought today, and you wake up tomorrow and your life is the same, and you say, this doesn't work. James Allen was wrong.
But a seed doesn't become a tree overnight. You can't plant an acorn on Tuesday and expect shade on Wednesday.
Exactly. Allen talks about the law of growth. It takes time. You have to persist in the new thought, even when you don't see the fruit yet. That is faith. That is endurance. That is the gap where most people quit.
Mistake fourth. Identity conflict.
This happens when your goal fights your self-image. If you want to be wealthy, but deep down you think money is evil, or I am not the kind of person who has money, you will sabotage yourself. You will subconsciously get rid of the money to align with your identity. You have to update the identity first. You have to become the person who can hold the wealth before you get the wealth.
And mistake fifth. The victim mentality.
This is the hardest pill to swallow in the whole book, believing that circumstances shape character.
I am angry because he yelled at me. I am sad because it's raining.
Allen reverses it. He says, circumstance does not make the man, it reveals him to himself. The yelling didn't put the anger in you, it squeezed the anger out of you. It revealed what was already in the cup. If the cup was full of water, only water would spill out no matter how hard you bumped it.
That is tough. It means the world is just a mirror.
It is the ultimate responsibility. But it is also the ultimate freedom. If the world is a mirror and I don't like the reflection, I don't have to change the world, which is impossible anyway. I have to change me, and then the reflection must change.
This has been quite a journey through just the first chapter. We have covered a lot of ground. Let's head into a recap to make sure we lock this in. We have distilled this down to 7 key takeaways.
First, character is not fixed. It is the sum of all your thoughts, conscious and unconscious. You are building yourself every day.
Second, the plant metaphor. Every act springs from a hidden seed of thought. No seed, no plant.
Third, the garden of the mind must be weeded. Neglect is not neutral. Neglect produces weeds. You must be an active gardener.
Fourth, the soul is dyed by the color of your habitual thoughts. Ordinary cogitations create your reality. Watch what you think about when you are bored.
You are the master weaver.
Fifth, shift your focus from outcome-based goals to identity-based beliefs. Don't focus on the marathon. Focus on being a runner. I'm the type of person who...
Sixth, inconsistency creates chaos. You cannot plant corn and nettles and expect a clean harvest. You need a unified mind.
And finally, we are the makers of ourselves. We are the master weavers. The shuttle is in your hand.
This sets the stage perfectly for what is coming next. We have established that thought shapes character. That is the internal world. But there is a burning question that usually comes up right about now. I can hear the listeners asking it.
The question is, okay, I can change my character. I can be a nicer, stronger person. That's great. But I have bills to pay. I have a difficult boss. I have health issues. I have a leak in my roof. Does my thinking actually change the outside world or just my inside world?
That is the big one. Can thought actually move matter? Can it change your paycheck or your environment? Or is this just about feeling better about being broke?
James Allen says yes, and he doubles down on it. He argues that the outer world of circumstance and the inner world of thought are inextricably linked. That is what we are covering in Episode 2, Thought and Circumstances. We are going to explore the controversial idea that the world you live in is a direct reflection of the thoughts you harbor.
It is going to be a fascinating discussion. We're going to challenge some assumptions and look at the hard truths of that claim.
I can't wait. It gets even more interesting from here.
I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on before the next episode. If your mind is a garden and your thoughts are seeds, what have you been planting in the last hour? And are you willing to eat the fruit that it produces?
A sobering question.
Indeed. Thanks for being here. If you want the full series, check the playlist and please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.